Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Barbarian Noetics podcast. I am nestled here in the Barbarian Lair, and I'm nestled with two good brothers. Very happy to be here today. This is a forum chat. We've appeared before, and we're appearing again. And we're here to discuss money. We're here to discuss life, and we are here to discuss Bitcoin. So I am Little Raven, host of the Barbarian Noetics podcast, and I would like to introduce my esteemed guests for today's conversation. First off, Jonathan Glowacki. Tell folks a little bit about who you are, where you came from, and what interests you in Bitcoin.
Yeah, thanks for hosting. My name is Jonathan. I hail from the Midwest, am full-time artist, and I was introduced to Bitcoin actually through a fellow artist years ago, I think it was 2014, nearly 10 years ago. He was a big conspiracy theory guy in many ways. So that was my introduction to it. So when I first heard about it, I didn't really pay too much attention. But then it just kept popping up in life and conversation over the next 3, 4, 5 years. And then I started correlating the price movement to it. And at a time when it was under $1, and now it's a new technology. And 3 years later, it's $10,000. And it just kept coming up in my journey to the point where I started looking closer and doing my own research and educating myself to the point where in 2020 I started investing into it, and then obviously paid even more attention to it because now I own some of it. So that's kind of been my journey with it so far. Pretty late to the game in a lot of ways, but maybe in other ways, we're still early adopters, but not like OG. Just I'd say I've really got kind of interested in it the last probably year, but yeah.
I'm going to pipe in really quick and just say that Jonathan Glowacki is a woodworker. He's hunkered in his studio making wood look like water.
It's true.
So, I'm gonna put it up on the screen too. glowackistudios.com. You should definitely check out Jonathan's work. It's really beautiful. It's really beautiful. And I wanted this conversation to be a free-flowing conversation about like the intersection of everything. Like money does not start and stop somewhere. Money is not one of my heroes, Lame Deer. He called it the green frog skins. These ugly green sheets of paper with these old men who were, the more I learn about history, the less impressed I am by the old men that are on the green sheets of paper. And it's like,
and also the less surprised we are about how the world is currently going, or that's my take anyways.
Yeah, exactly. But is it so outlandish to say that money could be artistic? Could we introduce art back into the world of money? We're getting really philosophical really fast, so let's hit pause and let me introduce our next esteemed guest. I'm very thankful for this gentleman to join the program today. He is friend of the show, Nothin. Nothin, please introduce yourselves to our listeners.
Well, my name is Nothin Wen. Nothing extraordinary about me, just a normal person that has a job. What got me into Bitcoin, I think I've heard about Bitcoin while in high school, but I never really put much thought into it because who really thinks about money and the anatomy of the state when they're in high school, about trying to figure out what they're doing with their lives. But then in 2020 and 2021, when the whole world seemingly shut down, I first bought Dogecoin with the premise of just number go up. I only really cared about making money, gambling essentially. And I dismissed Bitcoin because, I can't afford a whole Bitcoin. I didn't know you can buy fractional amounts of Bitcoin at the time. And I just got more curious about what cryptocurrency was in general, and then what money was, and then eventually, after experimenting with a bunch of different ecosystems like Ethereum and Solana, I just converged onto Bitcoin because, to me, Bitcoin promises nothing other than money. It doesn't promise any technologies or roadmaps, and that's what I find most important. It's money, taking away power from the state to control money. That's all I have to say.
Hell yeah, Nathan. And I believe you did like some education in economics too. Am I right about that?
No, I just studied math.
Oh, you studied math. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So was there any sort of like intersection there between like your study of math and your interest in Bitcoin?
Let me try to think.
Yeah, I'm just curious because it's just interesting, like the different avenues that people take to come to it.
I mean, I like that. This is the intersection I can think of at the top of my head. Being asked on the fly, but with the fiat monetary system, you have a group of central bankers that look at all sorts of metrics and determine when they want to print money and when they want to sell government bonds and stuff like that. So you're trusting these people, around the world to make these decisions for the whole population, right? And obviously, sometimes these bankers, these elites, make poor decisions that ruin everybody. They eat away people's wealth that they built over their lifetimes. But with money, or with Bitcoin, I guess the money is you don't have to trust anybody to determine the money. It's all secured through cryptography and peer-to-peer networks. And I guess the cryptography is where the math is. Like, I trust math, like number theory, more than I trust a central banker to look at the data and make the right decision. Because we've seen time and time again, they're either working against our interests or they just make the wrong decisions. And even when they make the wrong decisions, they fail to eat a humble pie and admit it. So
yeah, exactly. Thank you for sharing that. Like, my journey with Bitcoin definitely was impacted greatly by the 2008 crash that devastated so many people, including like people really close to me and my loved ones. And there's an element of trust that is like so critical when you're talking about something as foundational as money. It's this thing that we use to exchange goods for services. It's like, you could argue that, and in fact, there have been historical societies that have not utilized money, but we live in a society that is very much utilizes money, right? And so it's so foundational to how we live like our day-to-day lives. And then there's the element too that we work for it. Like we sell our labor on the market to get this money. And so there's this huge element of like trust. And when the 2008 crash occurred, and even before that, but especially the 2008 crash, I think there was a massive loss of trust that was felt, not just by me, but by many, many people. And a sense of almost like betrayal, that how like our loved ones or ourselves could like work so hard to generate these resources to sustain ourselves. And then how those resources could just like evaporate overnight, decline overnight, crashes, depressions. You start looking at history and you start looking at like since the dawning of the Federal Reserve, how many depressions there have been. There have been like this consistent like boom bust cycle. So for me, it was like I was casting about, looking for like basically looking for something to believe in, because we live in a society that utilizes money, and I wanted like a money that I could believe in. And that's what brought me to Bitcoin. And then just like watching it through the years, and especially connecting with other people who have also engaged with it. Because I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. Like initially, when I first started getting interested in crypto, I felt like I was adrift at sea because so many people around me had no idea what it was. And I felt like it felt very outlandish, and thus it felt very intimidating. But the more I talk to other people who engage with it, the more I get that feeling of like there's a foundation here and there's some element of trust. Jonathan, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and it just really calls into question, in even your journey with it through 2008, like what is money? And there were other cultures that didn't necessarily use money, but I would say that they used, a medium of exchange. And so when we start thinking about it from that vantage point, to me, it began to make more sense, medium of exchange. And so then when you start learning about how our medium of exchange works, the US dollar, you begin to see and notice how few people have incredible power to manipulate that system. And that becomes concerning, because humans are fallible, emotional, greedy people. And so if there's a small number of people who are controlling the levers, they don't necessarily care about all the people that their decisions are going to affect. And to me, it makes a lot of sense. No fault to it. It's kind of just the world we live in. And up until Bitcoin, or cryptography or cryptocurrency, however you want to look at the technology or the store of value, there necessarily hasn't been an alternative that the masses could begin to take part in and adopt. And so that's what we have with Bitcoin, where it's one medium of exchange that isn't governed by anybody, and it's available and the same all over the entire planet. And I think that is pretty cool. There's never been anything like that. Yeah, and it's just it's still it's still in its infancy in a lot of ways, and we could speculate on how it could look in the future, where it's going. Obviously, nothing's guaranteed, but neither is the U.S. or the dominance of the U.S. dollar.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about like whenever you start talking about Bitcoin, oftentimes there's a sense of trepidation or like uncertainty. Like I've heard many people say to me that they consider Bitcoin to be just a volatile stock. And I've even had like in my life, in the flow of life, I've had people even say to me that like, Bitcoin isn't even real money. They don't even consider it to be real. There's this like fear, there's this trepidation, there's this sense that somehow it's not legitimate.
Yeah.
Would you guys like to speak at all to what it is that actually like grounds Bitcoin in reality and makes it a real thing and makes it something we can actually trust? It's kind of a big question, but
That is a big
well, I
question.
mean, I think it starts with the understanding of what it is. And again, I think earlier to Nathan's point, you have to understand that it's cryptography. It's a trustless system. Bitcoin is just one of many cryptocurrencies, but it's a new technology that the world has seen, where there's a bunch of nodes, what have you, we'll call them computers, spread out all throughout the world, and they're all running equations. And in order for anything to ever get done, basically any blocks to be validated or transactions to be validated, all the computers and the math has to agree. And if it doesn't, there's not humans involved in this aspect of it. If the software and the computations, if they don't agree, it won't be validated. So it kind of, in some ways, the technology has been the power has been taken out of the hands of the humans, and it's kind of been put into a mathematical scope and then distributed all over the world. So yeah, it's a system. It's a whole network that has to agree or nothing ever gets done. And so for everybody to participate, everybody kind of has the same goals. And in order to have the same goals, there's not one person that can manipulate things like there is, or a few people like there is, with fiat currencies.
What would you say about this? The idea that like math does not lie, but bankers are capable of lying. Do you think there's some truth to that idea?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Like in math, like, like I don't. 1 + 1 is 2. There's no denying against that. Like math is built off of first principles and foundations, and its theorems and definitions are thoroughly proved over time through logical deductions. Like, but a banker, like, they could just make kind of. Am I allowed to curse in this?
Oh yeah, you're free reign.
Okay,
it's the Barbarian Noetics podcast.
I like bankers and government can just make shit up because they're incentivized, at times to not tell you the truth. But pure math like cryptography, there's just if the requirements are not met, then the requirements are not met. Like that wasn't like the most. Yeah, that's not the most elegant way to say it. Like I'm not the most elegant, speaker,
but that's what this conversation's about. This is about like we're just three dudes trying to survive and trying to figure out life and trying to connect with other people trying to survive and trying to figure out life. Mm-hmm. We're not trying to make things overly complex and complicated. And we're trying to like break down some of the barriers to that. My whole life, no one ever taught me anything about finances, and the stuff that they did teach me was like pretty much just dead wrong. And there's a sense of like betrayal about that. It's like, that's not fair. It's not fair that I have to sell my labor on the market, which is very real. Like when I've done landscaping, I've done like outdoor education, I've done like hard work. Like I've built trails and shit like that. Like that's very real. Like moving rocks from place to place. I've like hurt my back. I've melted metal. I've like done all kind of shit for these green frog skins. And then if there's not like an honesty there behind that, it makes me feel a certain kind of a way. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, like you want to know that what you are working for actually has value. And the beautiful thing about math, and my dad, he used to love studying math. He believed that math was almost like a language of the universe in certain kind of ways, that you can like understand the universe through math. And one of the things about math is that it doesn't have an agenda. It just is. Like and I'm horrible at math. So I have to like trust other people to help me with the math. But I appreciate it for the beauty and the elegance of like what mathematics is. There's no room for like there's no room for fuckery in math. It either is or is not. There's not like this hidden agenda. It's not like 1 + 1 = 2. 2 isn't trying to like get something out of that. It just is what it is. 2 is not like running some game on ones. It's just that 1 + 1 = 2.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely kind of intertwine some other ideas into that I've been thinking about, and I don't necessarily. Yeah, I mean, it's you said like we want to, whatever we're working towards, we want to know it has value. I mean, that's based on what we value. If we only value money, then, and this could get philosophical really quick. But then to your point, that would make more sense. To me, I mean, it's more important. I value my process and what I'm doing more than what I receive for it. So I think it's almost that there's like a fork there where it could be two different conversations. Because I think the argument could be really made pretty simply that the only thing that gives really anything value is people. If we believe it has value, it has value. Whether or not gold has value or Bitcoin has value or dollars have value, oil, money, food, all the things, they only have value if somebody values them. And I think that's kind of, to bring it back to Bitcoin, that's kind of the beauty of like Bitcoin, is that like there is almost this inherent built-in mechanism that there is not really, it's not like necessarily quote unquote valuable, but it's to the point now where it's being ingrained in the culture that so many individuals and institutions and pension funds in governments are now assigning value to it. It now actually has value and is growing in its perceived value. Just a thought from what you said, you know.
No, absolutely. I wanted this conversation to wax philosophical whenever, because I think it's just interesting. I think the whole idea of asking, like, bringing it back to the core of like, what is money? What is currency? I always love the connection between like currency and electricity. It's like an electric flow that runs through society and allows it to happen. But just like for nuts and bolts, we all live in the United States, which, like, you know, you need the money in order to survive. Like,
Yes.
People have to keep roofs over their heads. They have to be able to feed their families and stuff like that. So it's like, it's very serious business. And it just blows my mind that like that I was never educated in this stuff, you know, like in public schools. Like, no, there was never like a finance class in public school. No one ever explained to me like how stuff works. And the way it was explained was just like a little bit about the stock market, that like, you know, oh, you can like bet on a good stock and make some money type thing, which obviously like that's true. But then the other side of that coin is like, you can bet on a bad stock and lose everything. And, you know, my own mother, God rest her soul, like after the 2008 crisis, she told me, she said that she felt like Americans were the lambs led to the slaughter because they had been told to like invest in this thing, and then it just lost all of its value. And that just like broke my heart. And I'm not like alone in this, obviously, but like, fuck, you know, like, how can you work your whole life to, because people just want, at the end of the day, people want to be happy. They want to build families. They want to have like some degree of security. They want to know that like the place where they live is going to be there tomorrow. They want to know that they're going to be able to put food on the table and stuff like that. That's like why we work in the first place. And so then for that, like that rug to be pulled out from under everybody, I just think it was like a very shattering moment for so many people. And I remember the last conversation you guys taught me that Bitcoin, like the origin of Bitcoin, the genesis of Bitcoin occurred temporally, like right around the time of the 2008 crash, which I find very interesting as well. Mm-hmm. I'm right about that, right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, cool.
I guess like to anyone that's listening, like I just want to propose a question. It's like, if you're these banking institutions, they were leading up to 2008, they were making all these trades or severely leveraging their balance sheets, doing irresponsible things, and they fucked up. Like, if you fucked up, who bails you out? Nobody, right? Nobody bails you out. So why is it fair for the banks to fuck up and then the government bails them out by diluting all the money, all the value that you produced through your entire lifetime? Like, how is that fair? And wouldn't you want to somewhat opt out of that system? Like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not a fair system. I don't think the system was ever set up to be fair. Quite to the contrary. It's definitely not about fairness. And yeah, I mean, I don't is you would even ask, is Bitcoin fair? It just is what it is. It's less manipulated, although maybe it is even being manipulated by people who have loads of fiat to be able to buy it and sell it. But it seems like it's less manipulatable. Yeah, I mean, I think kind of the point that you're driving at is that it really is. Once you start poking around, and if you get interested, you're going to quickly start asking bigger questions about the current system in play. And those questions are eventually going to lead you to realize that it's a very imperfect system. It has lots of flaws, and it's been highly manipulatable, and it still is being manipulated. And now we have kind of an alternative system that it definitely is in relationship, with the current world economies. Without world economies, there would be no Bitcoin. So it's in relationship with it. It just seems to be. It seems to be the more that those world economic systems are manipulated, the more those who participate in Bitcoin will benefit. So there's a rebalancing of fairness in some way, if you want to look at it like that.
Also, the element of like internationalism with Bitcoin, because Bitcoin isn't cordoned off in borders. It's all around the world. People are mining the Bitcoin. So like central banks are dedicated to like, they're the central bank of their particular nation state, whereas Bitcoin like transcends those boundaries. I think there's some significance to that you can engage in a monetary system that like with other people around the world, you're not like cordoned off within your own nation state. I think that gives it like an enormous amount of power and potential. And the fact that like the strength of the Bitcoin network is in the fact that there are so many like nodes spread out all over the place. I wanted to chat a little bit about like that dichotomy between centralized and decentralized. Like, let's just talk about it. Like, Bitcoin is a decentralized currency. I'm right about that, right?
Yeah, I mean, which just means that there's not one entity controlling it. Like the Federal Reserve in the U.S. has the ability to, inflate the money supply, quite literally, whether it's put bigger numbers on bank account screens or print more currency. They're able to do that. And with Bitcoin, there is the beautiful, simple supply and demand economics at play, where there's 21 million coins, and that's it. That's all there will ever be. And so because the supply is set, the price is truly a reflection of the demand of it, which is a much simpler process. And it's easier to understand in a lot of ways. So the more, say, the US inflates its dollar, the more money it creates. Hypothetically, the more people have the opportunity to buy Bitcoin, and it's happening right now. Maybe not necessarily so much with individuals, but it is happening institutionally. Then the price of Bitcoin goes up, which is kind of what we're seeing. So, I'm sure many people have heard, if you poke around in this space, but it's a hedge against inflation. So as the money system that people use to purchase Bitcoin inflates, the correlation is that the price of Bitcoin will then go up, because there's more money floating around for people to purchase it with. And if you just look at the history of it now, 15 years or however many years it's been, you can see the correlation, and it's pretty cool. And it doesn't, one of the other things I really like about it is it's not rocket science. It's actually pretty simplistic. These ideas are pretty simple to digest and understand.
Yeah, the basic principle of supply and demand. And because there's no way that you can increase the amount of Bitcoins, like it's math, it's set. Therefore, it's something you can actually like build upon. Like you can't build a house on sand, but you can build a house on stone. And it's like they can't, that hedge against inflation is incredibly powerful. And like I'm thankful for it, because in many ways inflation is like changing the rules of the game as you go. It's like you're playing Monopoly, and then like, but someone has like their own little like printer of the Monopoly dollars, and they just create themselves. You know what I mean? Like it's
really slow. It creeps up on you. You don't notice it. For example, I remember about 6 years ago when you could get a decent used car for like $3,000, like nothing great, but you could just get a decent ride for $3,000. That decent car today, there is no decent car for $3,000. You can get a parts car for $3,000. You can get a car that's falling apart for $3,000. But if you want a decent machine in running condition, it's minimum $5,000 or $6,000. And so that's about 6 years. So like, and even we could do the same comparison with a bag of groceries, like, and it creeps up on you where you don't actually know it's happening until you kind of look back, and then you're like, oh wow, I remember, however many years ago, I could walk out of the store and get my bag of groceries for the week for $50, and now that's $100. So like, and so in some sense, it's hard to like get upset or resist the system because it's such a slow creep that people don't even know it, and then it's like a slow, torturous death. By the time you know it, you can hardly afford the life that you once lived because your wages necessarily haven't correlated to the inflation.
Absolutely. Yeah. The wages haven't increased. And then meanwhile, you're just trying to survive. Like you're so busy just trying to survive. So many people in the US are like working multiple jobs, side hustles, this, that. And it creates like this desperation mentality where you're just focused on, surviving from day to day. So I think that there is a possibility of actually being able to like work for money that maintains its value and actually increases its value over time is completely transformational. And it's a beautiful thing. So I wanted to address like some of the fears that people have about Bitcoin. Many people consider it to be like so volatile, so unpredictable. There's a lot of fears about the manipulation, like you mentioned, that if there's like an entity that buys like so much of it that they can somehow like affect the price or whatever by like a massive sell-off or something like that. Are you guys worried about that at all, or what are your thoughts on that? Either one.
I guess I'll go first if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Like, personally, I'm not. Bitcoin is volatile in fiat terms. Like, there's 21 million Bitcoin. That's it. But when people look at volatility, it's in terms of US dollar denominated value. That's what the volatility is. And sure, it might be volatile, day to day, week by week, but I store the value that I generated from working over the years in Bitcoin for long term. I'm not looking to buy Bitcoin and sell it the next day, or the next week. It's a long term thing. Say, preserving my value over time. It's a low time preference thing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It just
For
doesn't
folks
bother
that
me.
for folks that might not be familiar with time preference, would you just explain time preference really quick? Because I think it's an important concept.
Sure. I think, put simply, like low time preferences, at least to me, it's I don't want it. I don't want immediate gratification now. I'm okay with waiting a longer time frame in order to do something. So like for example, like uh, I don't know if this is a good example, right? But for example, suppose I'm hungry. It would be better for me to cook, to put the time and effort into cooking a healthy meal than to go down the street to go to McDonald's and get something quickly. One is a low time preference thing. Cooking is low time preference, but going to McDonald's is high time preference. I just want the immediate gratification. Was that an okay example?
I think that's an excellent example,
Okay.
honestly, Nathan. I think that's a really good example because it's like, yes, I was actually just talking about this on the podcast, like how the whole idea, like when you're hungry, like how are you going to feed yourself? You know, I really put a lot of like energy into how I actually feed myself, like when I'm hungry, because it's like when you put the time in to you procure the quality ingredients that have nutritional value and you know their source. You know, if you're someone that believes in organic produce, you can pick organic produce. You know where the food came from. You put it together, then you put the energy into like actually creating a meal and you eat that meal. That satisfies your hunger in a completely different way than if you just go to the high time preference method of getting the Big Mac. I'm not trying to talk shit right now. Like, I'm not trying to judge or whatever. I'm just saying, like, it makes a difference. How you satisfy that hunger makes a huge difference in your life moving forward. Like, it's going to affect how you feel, even just like the energy and attention that you put into creating the meal. So I think that's like a really good example. And I think, Jonathan, it reminds me of something that you texted me like a while ago. You said that it's not timing the market, it's time in the market.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I mean, so we got here because we were talking about volatility and yeah, the trend over time is what you want to look at. And in such an immediate what's the instant gratification culture, we all want everything to happen right now. Bitcoin is definitely not a get rich quick scheme. It's a get rich slowly, very slowly scheme, and not even perhaps rich, but like it's a store of value that perpetually will go up, and it doesn't happen super quickly. At times it does. It makes really big moves, but I think the important thing here is to, kind of lengthen our time horizon a little bit and realize that, I mean, especially for all of us, we're all, 30 to 40 years old, I'm assuming. And so if, potentially we still have 20, 30, 40, 50 years of life left to live. And like you, Brandon or Raven, I'm uneducated. I was never educated when it came to investing or retirement or savings and those sorts of things. Not that I even wanted anybody to tell me that because I wasn't interested in it. But now with a little bit of age, it's something that I start to think about. And even that's a shift towards like, well, what does my financial future look like in 10 or 20 years? I think there has to be a willingness and an openness to be able to kind of think about it from that perspective. And once there is, and then the education to go along with that, it pretty quickly becomes kind of a no-brainer. But yeah, the time horizon, it's a really key point to touch on when we're talking about Bitcoin, and it's not a get rich quick thing anymore. There was a time where kind of it was, but those days have passed.
I was actually gonna.
Oh, go for it, Nathan.
Yeah, I was gonna comment on that too. It's like no one here is saying Bitcoin is a get rich quick scheme. It's not. it's a long-term store of value. Like, I'm not here if I want to try to get rich. I'm not going to put my net worth into Bitcoin, you know. And even the earlier adopters of Bitcoin, like, it took them, years to get wealthy from holding Bitcoin, because for the longest time, Bitcoin was still worth like nothing to these early adopters. So yeah, lower your time preference. Think about the long term.
Yeah, no one ever.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it seems so simple. It seems like such a simple thing to say, but it really is. Like, lower your time preference and think about the long term. If you want to get rich quick, like if you want to get rich quick, this is not it. Go do something else.
And like anytime if you try to get rich quick, then you're entering a much more like risky situation where you could get poor quick too. Like there's seems like there's no easy answers to these things. Like it requires a certain degree of discipline and patience. And no one ever even taught me like the basic idea of like when you got like some money, you want to make sure that you have like the money like immediately liquid to be able to like handle if there's like a little emergency, if you can or whatever, for the next like say like 6 months or whatever. But then if you have other money, you want to make sure that that money is like doing something over that time. You don't want it to just like sit under your bed. You want it to be appreciating in value over that time. It's when you say it out loud, it sounds so simplistic, but it's very profound. And it's also something that was like never really taught. And we could ask like, why, why was this not taught? But it's being taught now. And I think it's really important. And, just the idea that, okay, so are you guys worried or nervous at all about, let's say like BlackRock and how much money they are pouring into Bitcoin and their ability to, like, if they wanted to, for some reason, like manipulate the price? Are you guys concerned about that?
I would say in the short term, no. In the long term, mildly, but we also don't know how it looks in the long term. The amount that they own today isn't concerning to me. The pace and rate at which they got the amount that they own today is concerning to me. Will this keep up? I don't know. But I definitely think it's something to keep an eye on. Like it's, with any sort of, with anything we do in life, everything changes. So we need to keep an eye on it. I don't think it's the worst thing right now in this moment, but it's definitely something to watch. And I don't know, part of me thinks that even with the new political structure that's coming into the US, where they're talking about making Bitcoin a strategic reserve asset, that could set off the whole game theory of, well, then other countries are going to do it too. And so if countries are doing it, if countries are acquiring Bitcoin, I'm less concerned about BlackRock. If countries don't start acquiring it, it's just BlackRock, So the more big players there are, the less I'm concerned. And so time will tell. We'll see how it plays out. But yeah, that's kind of how I see it at the present.
So it's you would say like it's not necessarily something to just like put your wealth in Bitcoin and then like just forget about it and go into hibernation for the next 20 years. Like it's something that we should definitely keep abreast of, understand what's going on, and know like what your options are.
Yeah, and not even, forget about it for 20 years. You can forget about it for a year, but I would for me personally, I keep my finger on the pulse of it because I also find it interesting and fascinating. And everybody has different goals with investing. Like some people are trying to retire off of it. Like some people are trying to, make a certain amount of money so they can go buy a vehicle or they can buy a house. Like everybody's goals are kind of different with it. The more big institutions that I see, or entities even, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds. There's other players as well, Fidelity. Like, there's not just BlackRock. Obviously, they're buying way more than anybody else. But the more big players, the less concerned I am about it. And then we're also kind of, the portion of the equation that's important is how much of your net worth are you putting into Bitcoin? For somebody like myself, where it's over 50%, I'm way more tuned in than, say, maybe a more level-headed strategic amount of 15 or 20%, according to traditional finance. Maybe you don't have to worry about it as much, So I think it just really depends on the situation and the person, and also I just find it interesting. I'm also not super risk adverse. That's just how I live my life, so I'm okay with it a little bit more. But it's kind of the cocktail of who you are and what you're trying to do with it, I think, is going to dictate how closely you should pay attention.
Right on. Nathan?
I think another comment on volatility, it's like another reason why I don't care about volatility is that, like, Bitcoin is a nascent monetary asset. I think it's obvious that Bitcoin will be volatile in its infancy. It's only in the long run, once the market cap, once the total global wealth is stored in Bitcoin, once that increases, volatility is not going to matter as much. Suppose like Bitcoin is, $10 million a coin, and you see a drop of, like 5%, like to the normal people holding like $1,000 of Bitcoin, that short-term volatility is nothing. I don't know if that makes sense. And another comment. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I think it's like you have to really like sit and decide like what are your goals and what are you trying to achieve, and then proceed from there. But I'm sorry I cut you off. What were you going to keep saying?
All right, you're good. And with regards to like BlackRock owning a bunch of Bitcoin, I'm not worried about that either, because Bitcoin's a proof of work protocol. So the amount of coins that you hold really doesn't give you skin in the game. There's no voting in Bitcoin. But on the other hand, like proof of stake protocols, and more, the more that you hold, the more votes that you get. That would be worrisome for me. And if BlackRock, for some reason wanted to fork Bitcoin in the future and do their own thing, I would believe that most people who adopted Bitcoin would just say, well, fuck your fork, we'll just keep our original Bitcoin fork and do what we want to do with it. I don't really care for institutions buying Bitcoin.
I mean, the way that I see it, it's more there's not loads of transparency with BlackRock's Bitcoin. Like, they don't necessarily like say who's holding it and where it is. To me, it's more of a concern. Are they going to use it to manipulate the price in their favor, like JP Morgan has done with precious metals for years, and even got sued by the federal government for it? And it came out that they did that, and they just had to pay a fine. I don't think they can break Bitcoin. I just think that the concern is perhaps that they could use it to manipulate the price in their favor.
I'm not sure if, so I know that BlackRock uses Coinbase as the custodian for Bitcoin. I'm not exactly sure if the addresses are public. Like, I'm sure someone has identified all of those addresses associated with the BlackRock ETF. So I think, like, even if BlackRock decided to manipulate the market, like, the market would be able to see it. I'm not like super, I don't know all the details about that, but I would imagine that it would be apparent, since all the addresses are public.
Yeah, let's hope that.
That's all I have to say about that.
Hope that.
Yeah, and as you know, like as Bitcoin just becomes a part of reality, it's gonna have to be like integrated into the governmental systems, and this is where like we as the people can make our voices heard. That like, you know, it's not. I don't think it's actually legal to intentionally manipulate markets, right? Even though it happens all the time.
Yeah, I mean, sure, unless you're the judge and the jury and you can pay them all off. I mean, yeah, by the letter of the law, I'm sure it's not, but that doesn't stop the manipulation and corruption that goes on anywhere there's massive power structures.
Yeah, that's true. I'm just like, I don't know. You know, technically we do still live in a democratic republic. So technically we should have like some ability to at least like assuage some of these regulations. But yeah, also like if people understand, if everything is totally transparent, is that like a little bit of a hedge against it too? Like if enough people kind of have the education to understand like, oh, this is what BlackRock's doing right now, they're trying to manipulate the price, I'm not gonna panic sell or whatever. I don't know, it's hard to predict, hey, because there's just so many moving parts.
Yeah, I kind of the way that I think about it is like, I think it's the best bet we have right now. It's way more transparent than any other system is. It's way more adopted. It's way more global than any other system is. Is anything perfect? No, but I think it's probably the best, freest system right now we have when it comes to money and store value.
For people who are like just first learning about Bitcoin or interested or want to dip their toe in, what are your recommendations for like how people actually go about purchasing Bitcoin?
Yeah, just sign up for any exchange. I think the top, Coinbase and Kraken in the US are really two simple options. And if that's even, honestly, I'd probably say that that's level 2 complexity. If you just want to buy Bitcoin, you can simply buy it, through an ETF on your brokerage firm. If basically a Ameritrade account or Charles Schwab or Robinhood, like you don't even actually have to buy the actual Bitcoin. You can buy it from a broker who will hold it for you. In the world of traditional finance, I mean, very, very, very simple. I guess that's probably the easiest way, unless you want to learn about how to actually buy it and custody or who holds it for you, etc. That's another little layer of the rabbit hole you can go down. But step one, I was talking to my dad the other day, and he was kind of watching, and I've been talking about Bitcoin now for a year with him, and he was always like, more traditional. He's a boomer, and he's like, yeah. Now as the price goes up, he's like, how can I buy it? And I was like, you just buy it through your traditional brokerage account. He has Charles Schwab. So he's like, oh, really? It's that simple? And I was like, yeah.
And you guys are fans of self-custody of Bitcoin, correct?
I advocate for self-custody, yes. I would also like to plug other exchanges if that's okay. Like,
absolutely.
If you find yourself to be strictly a Bitcoiner, I would recommend buying Bitcoin off of Strike, Swan, or River. These are Bitcoin-only companies, so they don't facilitate any tradings of the altcoins and meme coins. It's only Bitcoin.
Oh, wow. I haven't even heard of them.
Is that correct on the screen? Strike, Swan, and River?
Correct.
Okay.
I think Cash App is also another way to buy Bitcoin as well. Yeah.
And PayPal? Can you buy it through PayPal or no?
Honestly, I don't know.
I know that they have their own stable coin. I wouldn't be surprised if you can, or if not yet, soon perhaps.
Yeah, and all of these platforms, they have, you know, like DCA lower, like if you have a DCA dollar cost averaging thing that you want to do, they have lower fees for that. They offer like on-chain receiving withdrawal, lightning receive withdrawal, and they're very easy to use. Just another alternative way to buy Bitcoin if people are interested in it.
Nice.
And what is it about self-custody that you prefer, Nathan?
I like the idea of owning like the value that I produced. Like I worked, you know, I provided value, and I'm in exchange I earn money, right? But suppose that this has actually happened. This is not even conspiracy theory stuff, right? But suppose that I say something that is not in line with the majority of what people think. You might find yourself in the future getting a phone call or a piece of mail in a letter in the mail saying that, hey, your bank accounts are frozen. We're gonna close your accounts. You're debanked. Go somewhere else. And I don't like the idea of that because it's my money. You know, like I should own my own money. You shouldn't tell me what I can or cannot say, or what I can or cannot buy, or who I can or cannot send money to. You know, like that's my money. And then self-custody gives me that ability to not be unbanked, or to determine what I want to do when I want to do it. Yeah,
Absolutely. These are very powerful points you're making, you know, like that's absolutely 100% true. You shouldn't have to live in fear that your friggin' bank is going to get frozen because of one of your beliefs. That's absolutely true and important. If people want to self-custody, would you guys recommend the Trezor device? Do you want to talk a little bit about the Trezor device or other devices to self-custody?
I have a couple of devices actually. So I do have a Trezor Safe 3. I have the Bitcoin only firmware version. I have the Blockstream Jade, and I think I have a Ledger Nano X. I will say I like the Blockstream Jade the most. I just find it the most. I don't know. It's just the easiest one to use.
It's called the Blockstream
Blockstream Jade. Can I Blockstream Jade?
Blockstream Jade. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that right? Blockstream Jade?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, Jonathan told me about the Trezor device, so I have the Trezor device, and it uses pretty like simple but very like firm security measures, so that you can send the Bitcoin to. Basically, you have like your own. It's referred to as a cold wallet because it's not connected to the internet, and the thing about, and Jonathan, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about this. The thing about self-custody is that it requires a lot of personal responsibility. You got to make sure you have your shit together. You got to make sure that you don't lose your keys, that you keep your keys private, that you never put them on the internet, that you only write them down, that you know exactly where they are, that, it. So yes, it has benefits, but it requires a high degree of personal responsibility.
Yeah, I'm also a fan of buying it through an ETF. Even though I do self-custody, I see the value in owning an ETF. I own other ETFs. I feel comfortable with that system. To be frank, I'm a little bit more tech savvy, so I do self-custody. But I think for me at this point, I feel like it's becoming so widely adopted that I think the self-custody is a very important feature built into it. But personally, I don't feel the need. Like I'm not going to sit here and tell you that if you want to engage with Bitcoin, you need to self-custody. I think it just depends on your personality. yeah, do you want that amount of responsibility? Is it important to you to actually hold your own Bitcoin? And I've kind of waxed and waned with some of these feelings over time, and have done both actually. I did own some in an ETF currently. I self custody everything, but having other ETFs, it just makes me feel more comfortable with it. And I also realize that Bitcoin's not an island; it is in relationship to the financial world. So like, if the whole financial world collapse, Bitcoin collapses too. Like everything's inextricably linked, just like the sun, the moon, and the earth. Like if there's no more sun, there's no more earth. If there's no more moon, well, that affects things drastically here on earth. Like they're in relationship to each other, and it's in its current rendition. I don't feel super strongly personally either way. I think you need to kind of get educated and look at the pros and the cons of each side of it, and then make your own decision based on where you live and how much money you want to put in, et cetera,
So something that governments do that pisses us off is they print their own money to, for example, like fund wars or do whatever the fuck, or to bail out banks. And they print a bunch of their own money, and then that causes the hidden tax known as inflation, and it makes our lives much more difficult, and it really sucks. Is it fair to say that one of the nice things about Bitcoin is that Bitcoin actually benefits from countries printing their own money? Like the price of Bitcoin tends to go up when countries do this thing where they print a bunch of money?
I would argue that's one of the reasons it was created, as more of a, again, it's in relationship to that. They didn't necessarily need Bitcoin 100 years ago. Or when there was a gold standard as much, you could argue, but it creates a new gold standard. It creates a way where it's a beautiful way to engage with the economic system for the benefit of all of those who participate when governments, basically inflate their money.
I would also say like Bitcoin has an upper bound, 21 million, but fiat money has no upper bound. It's just infinite supply. So I would argue that as long as governments print their money, the value of Bitcoin will increase, because fiat is unlimited, but Bitcoin is limited. It's such a simple, it feels like it's such a childish and simple thing to say, but that's how I look at it. Because if like in the long run, I think people will start to realize like the values of their fiat currency will just keep being debased over time. Like for example, the United States has $35 trillion of debt, and that the interest will just keep compounding over and over, and that interest will keep accumulating on top of that debt over and over and over. On top of the 35 trillion, there are, I think, hundreds of billions of dollars of unfunded government liabilities like Social Security and stuff like that. There's no way for the U.S. government to pay for it right now, but the only way to pay for it in the future is to print money. So inflation is inevitable. Like there will always be money printing, and so long as Bitcoin is around, it will still be around. Not if around. I think the value of Bitcoin will be important because people will gravitate towards like, hey, this is a fixed monetary asset that's not being debased. Our governments can't take it away from us if you're self-custodying it. Our governments can't print more of it, and I think people will naturally gravitate towards that, converge to that over time.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm inclined to agree as well. We're over an hour now, so we're going to start constellating the tarmac to bring this conversation to a close. But I wanted to touch on, this is a huge topic, but I just want to hear your guys' thoughts off the cuff about it. Bitcoin versus altcoins. Our last conversation, we talked a little bit, and we had a little bit of a mini debate about Solana. At full transparency, I like Solana. I just like it. I just have a good feeling about it. I think it's a good cryptocurrency. It's fast and it's cheap, which I think is important. So I like Solana personally. I like some other altcoins as well. But let's just talk a little bit about the dynamic between, and for people who are trying to like dip their toe into the crypto space, the difference between investing in Bitcoin versus testing the waters with some of these other altcoins or meme coins. Your thoughts?
I can let you guys go first.
I mean, it's further down the risk curve. So the rewards are higher for these other altcoins and meme coins, but the potential to lose more is also higher. I think it's it's definitely a correlation between what you're trying to do and what your time preferences are in terms of and just how comfortable you are with your risk is going to depend on what you do. I think most people who just will kind of interact with some of the main cryptocurrency Bitcoin, but then say the layer one Solana, Ethereum. I mean, if you basically just stay within those, I think over the long run, your risk goes way down. And if you really stretch your time preference out, you're pretty much guaranteed to make money. But once you get interested, and if you get interested in the space and you start poking around, you see that the risk reward ratio, it really kind of goes up in a parabolic move depending on what you're getting into. And I would say that's kind of some of the meme coins where there are people who they'll invest a couple $1,000s and make tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars off of that. That's not everybody. That's definitely the minority, but it's also happening. So yeah, just, I would say if you're new to this space and you're not sure about it, just kind of stick with Bitcoin basically. And if you want to learn a little bit more, start looking at Ethereum or Solana. These are two of the other main chains. And then beyond that, there's 1,000 or 10,000 rabbit holes you could go down. But I think that's a good starting point.
So one of the things that people say, like especially squares always like to say about crypto is like, if you invest in crypto, be prepared to lose everything you invest. But when it comes to alt and meme coins, would you argue that that's actually more of something to consider, that you should be prepared to possibly lose what you invest?
Well, definitely meme coins.
Absolutely.
Again, it just depends which altcoins. Like, if they're some of the bigger altcoins, I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think that you might not stand to make as much money, but and there's so many coins now too, and as some of the other analysts say, the winner usually takes the most. So right now it's still a newer space, and not everything's going to do well. It's just evident, but it's also pretty clear which chains and which ecosystems are already doing well and probably will continue to do well.
Nathan, your thoughts?
I would say just Bitcoin only, because I look at this as like a what's important to you kind of way. Like if you think that it's unfair that governments get to print money and government gets to bail out banks for irresponsible activities, and I think putting some of your worth into Bitcoin is the only thing to do. I don't like with Solana or Ethereum or Cardano or whatever else you want to bring up. To me, it's gambling. I could see the argument, like you're betting on the technology. Like one of these chains have offered technology, but I'm not convinced. Like, what is the technology that isn't currently available in the traditional financial system? Like, I just don't see the value in the other chains, to be honest. And I've used these other chains. Like I've used like Uniswap, I've used PancakeSwap, I've used Aave, and I didn't see the value of them.
Jonathan, you have the squeakiest chair in the world.
Is that coming through on the video?
Yeah.
It's all right.
We'll lube it up next time. Keep it quiet.
It's kind of like ASMR, I guess. I'll say this, like, I think that people like new sexy things, and these chains are like ways of making payments. So like the way that we use like our Visa and our MasterCard to like, everyone's buying stuff online. Everyone has Square. Everyone wants immediate transactions. So it's just human nature that we like new sexy things. It's just, that's how we operate. And that's why I personally do believe in Solana. I mean, not forever necessarily, but I just think because, we just lost Jonathan, but he might come back. But because like it offers the fees for Solana are very low, and it's a very fast network to make payments. I believe that there could be possibility down the road that it does accrue some sort of mass adoption. And I believe that like PayPal is talking about working with Solana in their network as well. But I think, Nathan, like your point is really well taken, that like, what are we talking about here? What is your motivation for this? And honestly, I'm inclined to feel the way that you feel. Like my motivation is much more about having fairness. We're going to bring Jonathan back in right now. Hey, Jonathan, you back?
Hey. Yeah, I'm back.
Okay, cool. We're just talking more about the whole dynamic with, chains like Solana. And I was saying like to Nathan that his point is well taken, that it depends on your motivation for like what is getting you into the whole space. If what you're really interested in is like the fairness aspect and just like a reliable store of value over time, then it's hard to argue with Nathan's point. So that's why I do like the majority I do have invested in Bitcoin, but I have a little bit invested in some other altcoins, and I'll admit that it's kind of about the vibes.
Yeah.
And I'm keeping my finger on the pulse, and I'm ready to fold those into, when you have stuff on an exchange, you can fold your investment into another. So I can fold my Solana investment into Bitcoin at any time, at any point I want to do that. So I'm not just like, putting it in and forgetting about it. I'm watching very closely, and there might be a time when I decide to sell it for either fiat currency so I can, do whatever, or fold it into Bitcoin. The point is that we have like choices and options and freedom. And as long as there's the education, and that's the purpose of these forum conversations, is to try to increase the level of education, because it's not being offered by the mainstream media. It's not being offered in public school. No one taught me anything about finances. So if you got to do something, you got to do it yourself. And we're just trying to raise the level of education and make people realize that they do have options. And some of these options are really damn good. And I think Bitcoin is one of those.
Yeah. And to Nathan's point, I think that's super sound advice. But let's also acknowledge that the rest of the crypto space is kind of the world's biggest casino, and it's fun. I think it's fun. So if you can approach it with a mindset of, I'm 90% or 95% in Bitcoin, but then I have my 5% fun, bag, like have at it, have fun. But I think it's just approaching it with a plan that makes sense and really level-headed. I would say, especially with memes and some of the smaller altcoins, like, only invest what you're willing to lose, because the chance of losing it is high,
One of the things about the meme coins I really don't like at all too is that they're like constantly printing like shit tons more, or creating shit tons more of the meme coins.
It's so diluted now that the amount of winners there are, you might as well just go play the casino. Like you might as well just go buy a lottery ticket. It's so diluted. That wasn't the case years ago or even a year ago, but now there are so many people who have flocked to that space, and it's so simple to create a meme coin. And there's so many ways for the creators of the meme coins to manipulate those micro markets that I wouldn't say it's a safe space, but it can still be fun.
Yeah, just be careful out there, folks. Make sure that you really like know what you're doing. We're big do your own research advocates over here. So
That's
Make
right.
sure you do your own research. We're going to continue to have these forum conversations. I'm calling these state of the coin, the state of the coin addresses.
I like it.
We're going to keep having them like every 3-4 months or so. We're going to keep our finger on the pulse. Really quick, gentlemen, what is the state of the coin right now? How's the coin doing, Jonathan?
It broke 77,000 yesterday. Yeah, Friday. So it formed new all-time high. I think it's just getting going. And speaking of BlackRock, I don't know how familiar you guys are with the ETF of Bitcoin. And when I say the ETF, the collective ETF by whatever 9 companies have it, it's by far the most, it's outperformed every other ETF in the history of ETFs in a ridiculously short amount of time. I find that amazing. I find that telling. The whole, in investing, you skate to where the puck is going to be. You don't invest in what already, where the puck is, what's already kind of booming. And so if you just watch where the big players are putting money, to me, it's just telling, where the growth is going to happen before it, kind of becomes super mainstream. Because although we're educated in this space and we're familiar with it, we have to recognize that it's still kind of a niche thing. This isn't super mainstream. It's becoming more mainstream for sure every day, but we're not totally there yet. It's still on the fringes. And, there's plenty of people, you talk to them about it and they'll just roll their eyes. They don't want to have anything to do with it. So yeah, those are kind of my thoughts.
Also, really quick, just a reminder that money and Bitcoin are apolitical phenomenon. So don't allow any single politician or group of politicians to sway your feelings about this. This is about you and your own personal choices for how to store value over time. Politicians are opportunists. Politicians will try to get any advantage they can. If their lips are moving, they're lying. These are not people that you should put, and this is my opinion now, but these are not people you should put any stock into whatsoever. They're not here to help you. They're in for their own personal self-interest. They're opportunistic. They believe in nothing except their own desire to accumulate power. So don't allow any politician or group of politicians to sway how you feel about something as foundational and important to life as money.
Well said.
Nathan, you get the final word.
Okay. All right. I will say to people who are skeptical about the legitimacy of Bitcoin, like if you still think it's a scam or tulip bubbles, we see states across the United States starting to pass legislations to protect United States citizens and their right to own Bitcoin. For example, the state of Pennsylvania a few weeks ago, I think the House of Representatives, I'm not sure if their Senate passed it, but their state Congress passed a resolution for your right to own and transact in Bitcoin.
I did see that.
Yeah. In addition to U.S. states, we see nation states using government resources to develop. They either have already or they will be beginning to develop Bitcoin mining rigs in order to accumulate Bitcoins themselves. Like Russia, Ethiopia,
Bhutan.
We see Bhutan. We see companies like MicroStrategy, and I think there's another. I don't remember the names off the top of my head, but MicroStrategy and other companies starting to take interest in including Bitcoin as a reserve asset on their balance sheet.
Many companies. There's many companies that have are adopting that.
And I think also new accounting rules will start next year that would be more friendly to holding Bitcoin on a company's balance sheets. So that's the state of Bitcoin. It is a legitimate monetary asset. I don't know how you can argue against it. Like, you don't have countries, adopting things or wasting money to. What's the incentive for people to waste billions or hundreds of millions of dollars to accumulate Bitcoin? I'll just tell you that.
Absolutely. Thank you for putting it so like bluntly and directly that Bitcoin is a legitimate monetary asset. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise. It's because of people like you, Jonathan, and Nathan, and other people in my life that I know and that I trust and that I talk to about it, that I can have the fortitude when people try to talk shit to me about it and tell me that it's not real. I know in my heart that they're just not educated yet.
Right.
And so that's why it's good that we're having these conversations. And people, of course, everyone has different opinions and ideas, and that's a beautiful thing. Like, everyone should have the freedom to decide to like store their value however they see fit. But Bitcoin is a legitimate monetary asset, and the state of Bitcoin is strong, I would say.
I agree.
So I think that's a good way to bring this conversation to a close. I want to thank Jonathan. I want to thank you, Nathan, for joining. Like I said, we're going to be having these State of the Coin addresses periodically. So stay tuned for part 3. And much love, everybody. I just want to plug my sponsor really quick, Magic Mind. You can support me by supporting my sponsor, Magic Mind, magicmind.com/noetics20 for 20% off a discount or a checkout. It's a nootropic green shot, and they support me. So if you support them, it helps me. All right. Much love, everybody. Thanks so much, and we'll see you guys soon.
Great. Thank you.
Take it easy.
Awesome.